that's just a little, 5 minutes of brain teaser for everyone. Yeah, we're talking about stereotypes and myths about refugees today. And I think in this panel, we're going to be listening to great sharing by two individuals in a different line of work and different backgrounds as well. So I'll do a little introduction. First and foremost, on the center, we have Elroi Yee, co-founder of The Fourth. Elroi is a multimedia journalist whose stories have ranged from indigenous people, human trafficking, to refugees. His focus is on documentary filmmaking. And a lot of his projects are actually related to migration stories, including the award-winning multimedia stories, Students/Trafficked and Refugees No More, and a web documentary series called Work in Progress, and the COVID-19 documentary Gotong Royong Cocok Vaccine. So this means working together to vaccinate. And recently, Elroi has produced an advocacy project called Dari Dapur, or From the Kitchen. This is something that you can search up on Instagram as well and follow, which is uses food, very interesting, uses food to change narratives on migration in Malaysia. This is also done in collaboration with the UN Human Rights Office, is it? Yeah. So Elroi is, for those of you who don't know, is co-founder of The Fourth, which is an independent journalism platform, co-founder of an impact advocacy production company called Untitled Company. And on our very left, my very left, we have Onga Aung. And Onga is the co-founder of Reimagine Education, or RED. Again, you can also follow RED on social media for the latest updates. Onga is originally from Myanmar. She's resided here in Malaysia for the past 17 years. And currently, Onga works as an executive management assistant at a consulting company while pursuing masters in global diplomacy at the University of London. So as co-founder of RED, Onga is dedicated to empowering refugee children in Malaysia, offering alternative learning education, supporting refugee learning centers and communities with innovative learning initiatives to empower every child to thrive and be the best versions of themselves no matter where they may be. Onga believes in that education is a fundamental right and a tool for breaking the cycle of hardship. And her commitment to this belief drives her ongoing efforts to support and uplift the refugee community. So, to begin, I've actually categorized this discussion into 4 little sections, and I think we can start, trickling down by going, looking at things on a macro level first, which is perfect because we have Elroi here to discuss narratives, I think, that the media has worked on over the years in Malaysia on how refugees are being portrayed in the mainstream media. And I think I'd love for you to share what does the work or what does the portrayal look like from your own experience, and how the rest of the media outlets are showing it. And given that Malaysia is a multicultural, multi-faith society, we're not foreign to the concept of diversity, right? This is notorious for many years. But how do we look at the rest of the minority communities, and how has the media as a very powerful tool viewed or showed the plight of refugees so far? And talk about the nuances, talk about the language disparities, the styles, and the that has shaped public opinion so far. So yeah, go ahead. No. Does he have to press something?
It's on. Okay. Thanks. Yeah, that's... Even looking at the concept notes that I was sent for this session, I was a bit nervous. Of course, Ongar is much more better place to talk about some of the stereotypes that she has experienced personally. But in my experience as a journalist, in the mainstream media, let's say in the newspapers, it's still very clear that refugees and migrant workers are always written off as outsiders. So there's always like portrayed as a threat, a problem to be solved, an obstacle to overcome, something to manage or handle. So when we talk about diversity, Malaysia as a diverse country, it's actually just Malay, Chinese, Indian, and Lain diversity. The others is still not really considered diversity. I think refugees, migrant workers are often seen as an attack on that diversity, and is portrayed as such. If they come in, they will upset our social balance or our social cohesion. So they are an attack on our diversity. It's often portrayed that way. Having said that, I remember a time like, say, 7-8 years ago, where headlines can be outright racist, like floodgates, flooding in of Bangladeshi workers, or using those kind of terminology to describe migration, as if people are like a natural disaster, and how that feeds into people's fears. Of course, we've come a long way from those kind of terminology. I think the press is much more aware of how powerful their words are, and there's been a lot of effort, I think, from NGOs, from activists, from researchers also, in engaging the press, engaging mainstream media to be a bit more careful with their words. So I say we've come a long way. I think Malaysians, by and large, understand the words refugee, migrant worker in concept. If you were to put it to them, the man on the street, they would kind of understand. Yeah, oh, they're war, they came here. Yeah, roughly, they have that knowledge. But what is missing, I think, from that theoretical abstract is the real-life lived experience interaction with a real person who has come from a forced displacement situation, a migrant worker. The relationship is always as either an employer-employee or as a giver and recipient of aid. So we never have a lot of very equal sort of interaction, like where there is no power difference in that interaction. So they are still always outsiders or lower than us, and that's the interaction we have with them. So they are your security guards, they are your domestic workers, they are your construction workers, your low-skilled, low-wage workers, or they are the people you give charity to, and you get a photo op at the end of it. I mean, it's great. I mean, they need all the help they can get, but those interactions always have that sort of power dynamic. I would say that it is already there, and we shouldn't pretend that it's not there. There is a difference in power dynamic because they don't have documentation. We have documentation. We have status, legal status. So it's there. But at the same time, these interactions then, of course, fuel all the stereotypes that we have, that they are only like poor or destitute or needing help, or they need to be given skills or given like a leg up. Yes, they do, but that's not their identity. So if you ask me what was I think in the concept note, what's the stereotype we encounter the most in our work, I think that's the stereotype. They are a drain on our resources. We have to give to them. We have to help them. And without that, they will wither away and then become, I don't know, yeah. So I think that's the main stereotype that we have to deal with, a drain on our resources. And that for refugees in particular, that trauma is their only identity. Yeah, they are essentialized into that. All their decisions is based on past trauma. I don't think that's true in our interactions. So, for example, let's say we expect refugees only to be here because they are fleeing severe, like life-threatening situations. So when they come here, they should be grateful for just having physical security. I think that's one of the stereotypes that we often deal with when we talk to, when we run our programs. But actually, refugees are making decisions, informed decisions, as best they can at every step of the way, even in their migration process. They are not, it's not that they are fleeing suffering at every turn in their life. Yeah. So obviously they would look out for opportunities. Obviously they want a better life than what they have back home. And just like every one of us, they deserve a better life when they move. They deserve to want a better life. Yeah, we don't like turn them into these things that only need like the basic necessities to survive. They need to thrive. They need education as much as the rest of us. They need job opportunities as much as the rest of us. They need to feel belonging as much as the rest of us. So I think those are some of the stereotypes we deal with. A bit about, thanks for the introduction. I get very shy when other people introduce me. But what we do is, myself and Zening here, we run a little project called Dari Dapur, which is from the kitchen. What we do is publish stories about food from migrant workers and refugees and help people understand that migration has intrinsic value. People will come into our country, bring with them a lot of experiences, a lot of culture, a lot of knowledge, and a lot of food. Of course, bearing in mind, there's no real local food, right? Yeah. We fight over what food is Malaysian and what food is Singaporean, like it's the end of the world. But actually, all food comes from somewhere. And even our most favorite Malaysian food is, if you go through the history, it's a product of migration. So laksa, there's different versions of laksa all over Indochina. Probably coming from the north somewhere. Mohinga is from Myanmar, and it's fish broth in noodles. Laksa is sour, spicy fish broth with noodles. And it's all a product of migration. So if you don't move, you'll probably still be eating, like, I don't know, ubi kayu or something. I don't know, just ubi kayu or something. It's this migration that makes our lives richer, actually. And we move to make our lives richer and in some ways to enrich the communities that we go to as well. So this project, we put forward recipes and food stories from migrant workers and refugees. And we also have a series of web episodes where we bring famous Malaysian personalities to share a meal with a migrant worker or refugee and have a conversation over that meal. And we find that if you go to a migrant worker or refugee and you go to them as a guest in their home and you learn their cooking first before you talk about the difficult stuff, the conversation sometimes is very different. And so we and our camera crew just observe and film and then cut it into like a 10-minute episode, more like an observation on what do Malaysians want to talk to migrant workers and refugees about. If we set a scene for them where they are the guest in the home, how's the interaction like? And we find that a lot of times the interaction is as human as you visiting your neighbor for Hari Raya or for birthday or for housewarming. You go with the intention of bringing joy, with bringing something, a lot of times, like Nuriza was in one of our episodes, and without us telling, she brings buatangan for the host. And that's something every Malaysian does. You go with hospitality, you go with an openness. And of course, the host, the refugee migrant worker, receives you with full generosity, going above and beyond. Zening will tell you always, we ask them, just cook one dish. Just cook one dish. Enough for one person to eat. Enough for just these 3 people to eat. And we end up with a feast. Ask them to cook just one chicken. They end up with like 7, 8 dishes. So that's the sort of generosity that I think it's common in Malaysia, common all over the world, and common in refugees and migrant households, if we are open to receiving that generosity and that hospitality as guests. So I think this is how we try to break stereotypes, bringing people into a setting where there's no power dynamic. Of course, there will be some. Yeah, of course, there will be some. But we try to make the setting so that everyone has equal share in that conversation, has the same space at the table as the other person. So we find those conversations to be very refreshing, very honest, very always based around shared values of community, of family, of hospitality, of celebration, of food. So those conversations are shared values. So one of the things that we realize in our work, or any journalists in the room? No, huh? Okay. As journalists, we always know that there's a rule, you cannot touch 3R. Actually, researchers also know 3R, right? Yeah. Race, religion, royalty. Just now royalty was here. You cannot touch that. You will get banned, right? These three things. But when it comes to migrant workers and refugees, we realize there's one more R, which is rights. It sounds terrible to say, right? But once you say refugee, migrant worker rights, right, the audience just jumps a little bit. Yeah, so the human rights framework, sometimes it's not very easy to break these stereotypes, to come through with a message of empathy. So we instead use local values to talk about refugee and migration. So values like hospitality, like I mentioned, community, family, generosity, diligence even, these are all embedded in our local values and they are shared. Wherever you come from, I think these values, it's very easy to find common ground. They are also human rights, but the language and terminology is different. And we find that in that way, messages seem to stick better. Instead, if you say they need their rights, you can throw it out there, but it bounces back at you. But if you say you need to be hospitable to your guests, or you need to build community, in your neighborhood. Yeah, share with your neighbors. Be empathetic. Treat other people the way you want them to treat you. These are all values that we can easily find common ground. And we find this, like, if we put across advocacy messages with this sort of values framework, it really works much better in breaking stereotypes.